From Venable LLP, the information in this podcast is not intended to provide legal advice or opinion. Such advice may be given only when it is related to specific fact situations that Venable has accepted an engagement as counsel to address. And now, on to the show. And then I do this thing where I say hello and welcome to the Coffee People podcast. I appreciate you being here.
Thanks for having me, Ryan. It's great to be here.
I'm excited about it. We met about 2 months ago, a month and a half ago in New York. Would you mind just telling everyone who's listening your name and what it is that you do and why you were at Coffee Fest?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Marea Sinatra. I'm an attorney at Venable LLP. It's a full-service national law firm, but I'm based out of New York. And that's where Ryan and I initially met at New York Coffee Fest. I specialize in intellectual property matters. So I like to call myself a brand protection attorney. Primarily, I do a lot of trademark and copyright work. And that looks different for every single client. But that's sort of my day-to-day wheelhouse. And why I was at Coffee Fest in particular, I've spoken at this may be my third or fourth Coffee Fest event. And I initially sort of got involved in it just because I love coffee and I was interested in the space, and I have, clients in the food and beverage space already. So I twist my arm how awful I had to go and speak at Coffee Fest and get to, sample a bunch of the great coffee and, adjacent items that were there.
Everything I know about being a lawyer comes from my wife watching Suits and telling me what the story is about. So that's about the end of my legal knowledge. So I want to get into that in a little bit. But you mentioned that you like coffee and that you were excited to go to Coffee Fest. Wondering if you have kind of a first coffee experience, a first coffee memory, anything you can share about how you got started drinking this thing that has tied us all together.
I don't have one in particular memory. I feel like where I started to get really more into coffee was probably in high school, more hanging out with friends at, coffee shops and things like that, before you can go to a bar, probably a little limited other than that in the mall where you can hang out outside of, your parents' house. So that was probably where I started to drink coffee regularly and more of it. But at that point, I wasn't, I would say, a sophisticated coffee drinker. It was more I knew I liked it and, liked hanging out with friends in that environment.
I look back at that kind of era of my life and I wonder how much the waitress or the wait person hated me and us. Not because we were bad or rude or anything, but just because we would take up a booth for like 6 hours, with a rotating crew of high school kids. For like a $3 hot chocolate or a cup of coffee.
Probably a rite of passage.
I'm sure there was like a paper, rock, scissors for who had to take the table at some point. You mentioned you think of yourself as a brand protection specialist. That's a word that I kind of saw when I was researching what it is that we could talk about a little bit. I'm wondering, one, how did you get started down the path of being a lawyer, and then specifically, into an area that focuses on brands?
Yeah, I was always interested in the legal profession, but I became more interested in it when I went to college at Boston University, BU. Go Terriers for any Terriers who will listen. And I was a business administration major. So I was taking like finance and marketing courses and operations courses and everything like that. And they had a business law course, but it was sort of framed from the perspective of business owners, what not to do in the legal landscape. And I started to look forward to my business law courses more than my finance courses. And that's sort of when I said, maybe I'll try to go to law school. And just, from a business framework and, having experience on that side, sometimes, often most of the times, your company's intellectual property is one of the most valuable assets the company has. And that always intrigued me with working with something that companies and business owners prioritize. And that's sort of how I landed more in the IP legal space.
That's an interesting comment because as somebody who came from the hospitality side of things, I grew up in a restaurant, spent my whole life in and out of it. I can't say that I thought of any of that work as being IP in any way. When I think IP, I think like Marvel movies or something like that, Disney. But then looking back after, getting ready for this, I started thinking about all the training manuals I designed and wrote and then left in a binder for the next person, or, the brands and logos that we designed and that sort of thing. And I was like, oh, there really is kind of a lot there. What encompasses when we say that like term, brand or intellectual property as it relates to a brand? What is it that you're referring to? Like, it feels like a really big thing that's kind of hard to define.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. It encompasses a few aspects. And I'll give I can give an overview just so everyone
that'd be great.
on the same terms, vocab wise. Usually the thing that comes to mind first when someone thinks about a brand is a company's trademark. So a trademark is, in short, anything that could be a source identifier. So it can be a company's name, it could be a logo, it could be specific colors that are associated with a company, it could be a sound, really anything that consumers, associate with a single source. So if someone, talks about a trademark, that's what they're talking about, just a source identifier. And the goal of a trademark is to prevent confusion in the marketplace. So, you buy a bag of coffee beans, it has a logo on it, God forbid something's wrong with that batch of coffee beans, you know who to reach out to, who to sort of go to get it fixed or remedied. Or, in contrast, if you have a really fantastic experience and you want to talk about that brand to someone else, what what trademark to associate that with. So that's one bucket of intellectual property. Another bucket that your listeners probably run into every day, whether or not they know it or not, is copyright law. So a copyright is what we used to refer to any original work that's fixed in a tangible medium. So it can't just be an idea of something. A typical copyrightable content that someone in the coffee industry may have is they have specific menu artwork, or they have artwork on their coffee bags. If they have a billboard that they're using to advertise that has some unique text or artwork on it, they have a jingle that they're putting out, or even a commercial. A lot of times, a reel on social media, even though it's pretty short, could potentially be copyrightable depending on the content.
That was going to be my next question, is in the era of social media, and we're all putting out things, and there's an encouragement to copy as far as like trending and algorithms goes. I think that would be very confusing, even for someone in your position, as to, or even just the keeping up of what is new and coming.
Yeah, we constantly try to stay on top of the different media out there, on behalf of our clients. Definitely social media, definitely e-commerce platforms. Those are probably the two big buckets. Now there's also AI platforms, or social media and e-commerce that are integrating various forms of AI. So that's what we keep apprised of.
Not to question it, but you're a real person and not an AI, correct?
Yeah, I'll put my hand in front of my face so you can
Okay,
tell.
just checking. I keep seeing terrifying news about AI doctors and lawyers, and maybe it
No,
is good. I don't
I'm
know, but
real.
so there's all this stuff that could potentially have legal ramifications. But what are those? Why? I think, and I'm thinking about myself here selfishly, but also a lot of people who I know have gone down similar paths in hospitality. A lot of times we have a idea or a passion, and we're like, we want to serve coffee to our community. That's a great thing, right? Or beer, or whatever, wine. And so we build a cart or we open a shop. Someone might do all that. Why do they have to be concerned about the things that you're talking about? What is, it's because there's already so much to deal with. So
Mhm.
why is this important?
That's a great question. And one clients come to, initially with as well. I think there's two main reasons, right? From particularly a trademark standpoint. You want to make sure that when you're opening your business or you're starting out in the community, that there's no one out there that's using a confusingly similar mark already, right? You don't want to step on someone else's toes when there is a brand already out there, and you don't want to do it, anything to possibly infringe on someone else, right? So, from a risk management perspective and a risk mitigation perspective, we tend to work with clients to do trademark clearance searches to make sure any trademarks or logos that they're thinking of using are not already taken by someone else. So that's sort of what I'll put in like risk mitigation category. Another reason is if, your startup business or coffee cart business wants to expand to ever a physical retail location or wants to license the intellectual property of the trademarks in the future, you want to maybe obtain a federal trademark registration so you're protected. If anyone tries to copy your trademark or your brand, and someone may say, "Hey, I really like those that logo, or I really like those colors," and say you live in California, and then they go to New York and open up a similar shop. If you don't have registrations in place, or if you don't have a licensing plan in place, you may not be able to enforce or do something about it. Um, and if you don't seek trademark registration, you may be pigeonholed or limited to a specific geographic area, and you to expand nationally. I'm strictly with the U.S. There's a different framework globally, but this is just U.S.
Yeah, like I think when I register a business name, it's usually in my state. And so thinking about it as a bigger thing, all of this sounds like things that you're saying. I guess timing is my question. So is this stuff that I should be doing, before I launch? Because in a lot of cases, there's this MVP, most valuable product. Like, let's get out there, see if anyone even cares before we invest, right? Attitude, especially in hospitality. Or what if I've already started my business? Like this show is 6 years old. What if I hadn't done any of this? And I'm like, oh, can I still do it now? What's the timing, or, what is recommended, and what is the recourse if you haven't followed that?
Yeah. I mean, I would always recommend to run a trademark search before the business even starts, before you select the name. You may want to talk to your legal counsel and say, "Hey, I'm between two names or two logos. These are the ones I'm interested in. Which ones are available? Which ones are better from a legal standpoint or more protectable?" And your attorney and trademark counsel, will be able to guide you through that process. If you've been using your trademark for a while, in the US, there's common law trademark protection. So you are accruing some rights just by being out there in the market. And there's no prohibition on seeking registration in the future. There's no like, if you use it for a year and don't apply for registration, you can't apply for registration with respect to trademark law. So if you decided tomorrow that you wanted to file an application with the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, it wouldn't be rejected based off of just time alone. Um, But we always say sooner rather than later, from my standpoint. But I do recognize the realities of a business and a startup. You have a lot of things that you have to weigh a cost benefit, too. A lot of expenses happening, especially with opening up a physical location, and a lot of fixed costs. Money is going into leasing, equipment, things like that. And it may seem like a very far off and abstract thing to try to do a trademark search. Um, but I would tend to look at it almost like insurance. You do it, you secure the rights, and hopefully down the line you can monetize them. But if not, you have some protection.
Sure. I was thinking about just the money part of it. And also, I'm in a position and I'm using myself here a lot, which I don't always do, but I think in this case, it might help give examples. I just moved from one state to another state. So I'm redoing all these things that I kind of went back and did 5 or 6 years ago and going, oh, I've actually kind of just sort of the evolution of this brand has changed. So how do I define this now? I'm wondering about, paying for it. I don't even necessarily, I'm in a new community. I need to find a lawyer. Does it have to be local? I'm also thinking about just like, this show started with like a $15 a month, stipend that I had to allocate. So now 6 years later, things have changed. But what should people expect when they're thinking about building that into a budget or their business planning, for example, for those that actually think about that far ahead?
That's a good question. I would say for trademark law is federal, so you don't have to have a trade attorney that's specifically in your own state or your own community. You're based out west. I'm in New York. Hypothetically, if you said, Maria, I want you to handle my trademark work, there be no issue. Because you just have to be barred in your state that you're practicing. I think monetarily, everyone could, at least right now, the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office has a fixed filing fee that they charge. That's, you can go online and look, and it tells you the fee by class.
Mm-hmm.
And it depends on how many classes you're filing for. Attorneys' fees vary. Some places do a fixed fee for filing trademark applications, so it's easier to budget. And that's something that you can sort of work out with your counsel and say, if I file this week, does the bill have to get paid 30 days, 60 days from now? Is there going to be any more action on this file this month? Is it going to be something that I'm going to file and then there's nothing for another 6 months? And your attorney would be able to give you a good estimation of that, in my experience.
Sure. I think the price point, I've been on the trademark site, albeit not recently, isn't overwhelming, but I think what was more confusing was just navigating the site, figuring out what classes I qualify for. And if let's say you have a coffee shop, are you, food and beverage products? What if you're also selling t-shirts? Like there's this whole other web-based businesses. There's stuff there that just gets confusing. That it's one of those things that I'm like, I'm going to put this off because there's only so much brainwave power, and limited in my case, obviously. But
Mm-hmm.
I was wondering about the talk that you gave at Coffee Fest. Unfortunately I missed that. How did you kind of prepare to talk to a group of people in an industry specific, or, what did the people at that event learn and take away?
So I've sort of modified my presentation slightly over the amount of time that I've been speaking, just because I want to switch it up. And, if people return to Coffee Fest year after year, I want to give them something a little bit different each time. I still try to cover the basics, because I know that there's a good mix of people starting out versus people who are maybe interested in more now franchising type of route. So I usually cover common types of intellectual property. We talked about two already here. Another one that I usually discuss in my talks is trade secret. So those are just sounds simplistic. Anything that your company has that is secret that would cause a competitive business advantage. So a lot of examples I give are customer lists, your revenue data, your uh, cost of goods sold data, sourcing information, things like that. That's not widely known. That's very unique to your business. Um, Loyalty programs, things like that would fall under trade secrets. Recipes, if you have specific roasting recipes or specific food recipes that you don't disseminate outside of your business. So that's something I talk about in the Coffee Fest talks as well. I touch on design patent and trade dress. So we go into that in those talks. I talk a little bit about licensing and sort of licensing do's and don'ts, and terms that business owners they want to consider if they're entering into a licensing relationship.
The talk that you've given, is it available for someone who can't go to Coffee Fest?
No, unfortunately, I don't think so. At least I'm not aware of it. I think you have to be there to go. But I have even other talks that my firm links on my bio that aren't coffee industry specific, but talk about trademark and copy.
Similar things. You mentioned design, which has a lot to do, obviously, with brand and the image that the feeling people are trying to convey when they think of what you do. We're in an era where, not to, it's kind of economic too, but like there are people who are doing a lot of like very high end original design, and there's also a lot of, say, Canva or Fiverr where people are repeating things. How has that impacted this particular part of starting a business? Because if I walk down the street, I'm here in Portland, very kind of known for its originality and kind of weirdness, but there's still a lot of signs that I go, oh, I recognize that. I recognize that. That font is the same, or that thing is the same, or like the lightning bolt that I use is, I'm sure someone else is using at some point. So how does that change things if people are using the same sources for their design or their content?
So that's something that I always talk to clients about. How did this logo come about? Was there any inspiration? Was it something that you worked with a specific designer on? Did you use, AI to help generate it? That type of thing. And that also helps to figure out what protection may be available. If it was generated completely by AI with no, human feedback or commentary, it may not be available for copyright protection, or protections available like that.
Is that evolving? Like the law wasn't necessarily written with AI in mind. So are all these things sort of in flux right now?
So Congress hasn't changed any of the copyright laws recently with respect to AI. The Copyright Office has issued guidance about copyrightability in AI, and anyone interested in reading that could be found on the U.S. Copyright Office website. It's a little dense.
They can just have AI summarize it for them.
But the Copyright Office has issued some guidance. I will say, if you are using AI to generate something, especially if you're going to use it in a logo or you're going to try to get it registered or protected, you may want to seek out legal counsel just to make sure you're not stepping on someone else's toes. And it's something that you can apply for. In terms of guidance with clients, if they do have original designs that they're creating, or if they work with a designer to create, we have been advising to file for copyright registration, because we have seen where those designs have been fed into AI models, and you want to be able to enforce, your rights if you need to. So that's guidance where, maybe historically clients may not have been as proactive in filing for copyright registrations. We're seeing more of an uptake in that.
You mentioned earlier a global marketplace and different rules. The protections that we're talking about essentially end at our borders if you're filing for a federal copyright or trademark. Is that, or does it overlap?
So, trademark law, each country or territory has different registration requirements. There are some countries that have territories, so like the EU will have protections for the European Union. Other countries like China have their own framework. Copyright has some overlap with other territories, more so than trademark law. Trademark law, there are treaties that have the international classes sort of overlap. That's why they're the international classes. But you would have to work with local counsel in different territories.
Yeah, and that's not something necessarily your local coffee shop will be worried about. But we are in a global marketplace, even with coffee, and it's not lost on me that a significant uptick in audience, and that is all from one region of, say, India or China, may be part of an AI scrubbing system. And so you start to look at that and go, well, what am I doing? I think one of the things that this is a problem that I have, which is I ask these wide 2-part questions. So this is going to be one of those. Just warning everyone. The first is all of this feels scary. I'm sure there's like I'm sure there's like a DIY way of doing this. What is the value of saying, you know what, I'm going to work with someone like Marea or Venable, and offload this? Like, what value are lawyers providing to people in this space? And then secondarily, what opportunities might that also provide, or might be missed if you're not doing that?
That's a good question. I mean, someone may be fairly confident in filing for a trademark, but they may not be thinking about the copyright aspect, or there may be some form of, whether it be a coffee machine or a cafe design or layout that may, have some sort of trade dress protection that they may not be thinking of. There may be different forms of protection that someone who's not familiar with the intellectual property space or the legal field may not pick up on at first blush. So working with counsel could solve that, and they can get a feel for your business and what may be out there and what may be protectable. It's interesting that you said it's sort of a scary thing. I think working with counsel takes away some of that fear, because counsel could try to help you prioritize what matters at your in particular stage of business, right? So you could go to counsel with a budget and say, this is what I'm willing to spend at this time. What could I do with that? And they may say, okay, this is priority A, this is priority B, but this is priority C. Right now, you may want to target filing a trademark application for your company, your brand name, and that's all your budget allows for at this time. When you're willing to, maybe pursue this further, I would recommend doing option B, filing your logo. And it sort of may give, you and other business owners a little bit of more security in having a plan and what makes sense for where the company is and where the company may be going. You may talk to your outside counsel and say, I'm not selling t-shirts right now, but in within the next year, I know that I want to start selling hats and I want to start selling t-shirts and sweatshirts in connection with my business.
Sure.
And, I may be able to give you a recommendation for that and say, okay, you may want to think about filing for trademark protection now. You may want to do a clearance search to make sure no one else is already using, your trademark with apparel. And that goes for any other good or service class. But that may be something that working with outside counsel also helps.
Uh, I am wondering about I'm wondering about you. You mentioned you went to university in Boston. I believe you're a New Yorker, New York person. Was
And
there kickback? I mean, blowback when you went off to Boston for school? I feel like that's important that you survived that. That we all know that you then came back and were accepted.
yeah, I was given a little bit of a hard time with by my family. But I will say I do have other family members and cousins that we all seem to go up to different schools in Boston for college, and then came back down to the New York area. It did mellow out our accents somewhat, which I still have a little bit of a New York accent, here and there, but it was a lot deeper before going up to Boston. So for that, I am a little grateful.
I don't think people think of Boston as a less accent influenced location, generally speaking, but um, uh, anything about kind of this first, like, hey, everyone, think about this, maybe research it more, or reach out to somebody, or look into outside counsel. Actually, that's actually a question that I should have included in that, which is, how does someone go about finding legal help and or knowing if they are good at what they do? Is there like a platform that, like, there's like Rate My Professor? Is there like a Rate My Lawyer somewhere? Or, how do you know if you're working with somebody who has your best interest at heart?
I mean, sort of. I kind of compare it a little bit to working with like a contractor. Like the best contractors are usually found by word of mouth. Um, there are a lot of resources in terms of bar associations in each particular state. If you want to look up attorneys in New York, there's different lists for attorneys in New York. There's always top 10 lists, top 100 lists of attorneys out there in different practice groups. I would say, use your networks. If you know someone that has been successful in the coffee space and works with someone they like, I would maybe get their contact information. And a lot of times, an attorney will speak to you for free, and get a feel about whether or not the client relationship is going to be beneficial for not only you but the attorney. It has to be mutual. So I think I would say a lot of clients that I have come from referrals. So that's definitely a good source. Um, if you have family members in the space, reach out to them. And then bar associations are probably your best bet.
Actually, all of the contractors that we've used on our house in the last 2 weeks, 3 weeks that we've been here have been referrals. Um, and we met with a few outside of that, but we ended up going with the referral because, well, they said this and I trusted them. I don't know you, but I will, work with them. And there's kind of this uh, organic Yelp, let's call it, space. And so on that note, I'm wondering if you have be that's obviously great advice. Use your referrals, use your network. But I'm wondering if you have any advice that's kind of stuck with you just in your life that you might be willing to share with us as a lesson learned, a way to go about life in a more intelligent way uh, for the rest of us. We're always trying to learn from smarter people than us.
I wouldn't necessarily say I'm smarter people than you, Ryan, or the people listening. I would say, it comes down to, I guess, trust your gut, especially in the age of like AI that we're living in. There's always that gut check that, we as humans have that I don't think AI will ever be capable of. If something smells off to you or doesn't look right, sort of trust that instinct.
Authenticity. I was thinking about that when we were talking about design a bit, and just maybe you don't have like the best, like, you can't draw the best, you can't do this, but if it's authentic to you, people will feel that. My favorite logo is kind of a really janky dinosaur hand drawing that someone did for a coffee brand and just stuck with it. And I just love that. Like, they loved it, they believed in it, they just went with it. No one is copying it at any point. uh, when you go out for a cup of coffee, which I assume you have to do often, what is it that you order?
Oh, that's a another good question. I tend to fall decidedly on like the hot coffee beverage side. My husband is almost an exclusively iced coffee
Mm.
drinker. I am usually, even in the hottest days, whatever I get is going to be hot. Um, I would say I've been tending to visit more of the local shops. I had, like you, I had just done a move, within the last 2 years, so I'm still sort of exploring all the shops in my home area. Um, I like a dark coffee, but I don't like a bitter coffee. So I like
Mm.
something that sort of treads that line. And then if it's an extra special fancy, I'll get a cappuccino here and there, but usually it's a black coffee.
Are you a movie watcher?
I am. I haven't been to the movies in an
Well,
embarrassing
nobody's
long
yeah,
time, probably.
nobody's been to the movies in a long time unless they were in the movie. I think I could be wrong on that, but do you have a favorite New York movie?
Oh,
There's so many. I know
I
it's challenging.
know. There are so many. None are coming to mind. I will say that I used to see a lot of movies being filmed. My office has always been around the Sixth Avenue area. We moved from, we were in the Rockefeller Center complex. Now we're right by Bryant Park. And we see a surprising amount of movies being filmed in that area. And that's always really cool. Kind of see the behind the scenes of what goes into making the magic. And then it eventually gets released and you're like, oh, I know, I saw them filming that. So I like that aspect of it. I can't think of one in particular right now, actually.
That is a very New York thing. One of the offices I was working in Long Island City doubled as uh, the police station in Law and Order, but I
Oh,
didn't know that when I started there. So I thought someone had been murdered in the building when I was going to lunch, and I was so confused as to why no one stopped me from just wandering through. And then I found out, and I was like, "Oh, that's so cool! It's Law and Order." And then I was riding my bike along the Riverside Path, and I saw these cops, and I thought, "Oh, they're shooting Law and Order," and it was like, "No, that's just like a real, actual situation that needs to be dealt with." And so I had to learn. I was very naive in that way when I first moved out to New York. What did we miss? What comes next for you? What's anything else that we should share today?
let me see. I hope that they'll invite me back to Coffee Fest to speak next spring in New York. That one is easy for me to attend just because it's sort of right in my own backyard. I have spoke at Florida last year, and there's a chance I may speak in Chicago this year. I don't know. I got to figure it out. But if I do speak in New York next year, I would love to meet everyone and answer any questions people have. It's usually a really great time. Um, and that's on the sort of immediate speaking horizon, I think, in terms of the coffee space. I have a few other podcast episodes coming out that I've, filmed with various folks, not particularly in the coffee space, but with trademarks and copyright. And I usually share them on LinkedIn. So if anyone wants to check those out and reach out, feel free to do so.
We'll do that. We'll share that link to your LinkedIn as well. And if there's any other shows that are out by the time this comes out, then we'll share those as well. Marea, thank you so much for being here. I just really appreciate it. And it is an interesting component of business and starting a business in coffee or elsewhere that maybe doesn't get thought about right up front. Before we go, I have one last thing. Is that okay? You have time?
Yeah, sure.
One of the things that I was thinking about is, and now I feel like I just lost it. It was like right there. This is my life right now. I apologize. It's just everything is so overwhelmed.
It's no problem.
And my coffee is empty, so it's probably time to go anyway. I'll follow up and say, hey, here's my question from an email. I'll think of it tonight at like 4 a.m.
All right. When